Since the very first shipment of vaccines a week ago, it's all we seem to talk about. And so tonight we ask, vaccinations or not? Welcome to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Just last week, we witnessed the arrival of the very first batch of the COVID-19 vaccine, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, a gift from the government of India to members of CARICOM. But just because there are vaccines doesn't necessarily mean there are people lined up to take them. Tonight, on this edition of On the Record, we discuss to vaccinate or not as we sit down with the experts to learn about the vaccines themselves and the vaccination process. Stay tuned. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer, and tonight we bring you to Vaccinate or Not. On March 15th, 2020, the Bahamas recorded its very first case of COVID-19, just some 5 months after the first identified case in Wuhan, China. Fast forward now, 1 year later, we have received some 20,000 doses on island, with another 100,000 expected to arrive very soon. My guests tonight are experts in the area of vaccinations, family, community, and preventative medicine. I'm pleased to again welcome Dr. William Schaffner. He's a professor of preventative medicine within the Department of Health Policy in the U.S. and Dr. Majette. He's a clinical instructor of family and community medicine at the University of Maryland's School of Medicine. Gentlemen, welcome to On the Record. Dr. Schaffner, welcome back. Good to see you again.
My pleasure. Good to be with you, Jerome. And
we still have that open invitation for you to come to the Bahamas. I'm going to make sure that Dr. Majette gets that invitation as well. As soon as things quiet down a bit, you're always welcome here. But let's dive into why we're here tonight. Locally, we are experiencing a whole lot of anxiety and apprehension in regards to the vaccines. Some people think it's too soon to have a vaccine prepared. Others are worried, though, about the recent recalls, etc., with the AstraZeneca vaccine. Is it normal to have this kind of apathy towards vaccinations?
Well, Jerome, this kind of apprehension is normal. People are concerned. This is a new virus in the human population. We've created new, spectacularly successful vaccines in a record time. And sure, people are a bit wary about that. But now in the United States, we have vaccinated over 70 million people already, have received at least one dose of these vaccines. So their safety, I think, is now very, very impressive. And we're recommending that everyone who's eligible for the vaccine come forward, roll up their sleeves and get the vaccine, because they are very effective.
Dr. Majette, from your experience, though, I mean, and I say it all the time, we grew up up taking vaccines. It was a part of normal life. But nowadays, there seems to be a movement and a shift away from that. You have a lot of people challenging the validity of vaccines and even the process of vaccinations. Dr. Majette, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, was that a question to me, Jerome?
Yeah, sure.
I'm having trouble hearing you. Sorry.
Nowadays,
repeat the question again?
Sure. Nowadays, a lot of people are challenging the validity of vaccines and vaccinations. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, and it's understandable. The vaccines, although they are very effective, people across the world, and I would say particularly people of color, have had difficulties with the medical system. There have been times where things have been simply done incorrectly, and people have been hurt by that. So to have a healthy sense of hesitancy is expected. But we can assure folks that these vaccines that we have right now are very safe, and the benefit far outweighs the risk of getting COVID.
Dr. Schaffner, let's talk a little bit about the rigorous trials that went into the development of these vaccines long before they went public. For a lot of people, they look at it and they think the trials, etc., began a year ago. But if you can really help us to understand the background to all of this.
Well, it's very important, Jerome, to understand that the science behind developing the vaccines has actually been in the works for 15 or 20 years. So when we say we quickly made a vaccine, well, that's right, but the science has been worked out over a long period of time. And then, of course, once we had a vaccine, volunteers came forward and were entered into large trials for all of these vaccines. 15,000 people received each of these vaccines, and their efficacy, their effectiveness, and their safety were demonstrated and then critically reviewed by an external advisory committee, one at the Food and Drug Administration and another expert advisory committee at the CDC. So these vaccines were carefully assessed. Do they work? How well do they work? And are they safe? And I'm pleased to say that all of the vaccine manufacturers went out of their way to recruit volunteers that represented the diversity of peoples in the United States. So people of color were clearly represented in these vaccine trials.
Dr. Majette, in the Bahamas, we have received the AstraZeneca vaccine. And I know that in the United States, you've not focused on that particular vaccine. It's been Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. From your perspective, can you explain to us why is it that the United States has chosen not to use or not to accept at this time AstraZeneca?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that's the correct characterization. AstraZeneca has not applied for FDA approval as of yet. So that's the first step in the process. So once they apply and the FDA actually goes through their process of making sure that their studies and their safety and efficacy data actually makes the cut, then it will be available here in the United States. I think that's really just a matter of they decided to focus on the EU countries first. As opposed to the United States.
But you can, and this is for either one of you, you can understand the apprehension of a little country that has 300,000 people when you look to the United States and the vaccine that we are receiving is not in the United States. And it raises, for many Bahamians, raises the question, well, why isn't it being used in the United States? But you raised a good point. They have not applied. In an instance like this, when the world is really in dire need of vaccines, is it a commonplace to have different companies producing the same vaccine or similar vaccines that should be doing the same thing? Is that a commonplace?
Well, let me just start, and Dr. Majette can follow up. It's actually very common, and there are many vaccines now being used around the world. The Chinese are using vaccines and are selling that vaccine to a variety of different countries. So is Russia, and India is manufacturing vaccines. So actually, that's kind of exciting. The scientists and the companies in many parts of the world are all contributing, developing their vaccines, so around the world we can reduce the impact of this pandemic. As I like to say, the more the merrier. We need as much vaccine as we can get.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that. There's probably somewhere close to 60 plus vaccines that are in some sort of development right now around the world. So we have a lot of vaccines just for COVID. That's a lot of vaccines. So usually we don't have that many companies that are trying to kind of solve the problem, this medical problem. But this is obviously an unprecedented pandemic. So that's why we have so many countries that are vying to kind of make a good vaccine. The other part of that is that we have to vaccinate the whole world. This is not a United States problem. This is not a European Union problem. Everyone has to be vaccinated. So we're going to need all hands on deck to kind of get all these vaccines and the 7 point whatever billion people that are in the world vaccinated.
Now, one of the concerns, with any drug, the overriding concern will always be side effects. And I want to put into context some of the side effects that may or may not be out there. There's a lot of misinformation, and I just want to put it out there on the table. But by and large, and this is for both of you, from what you have seen, would have been some of the effects that people are experiencing. And then once you get the vaccine, what should people expect?
Dr. Majette, go ahead.
Okay, I'll start with that one. I think the common side effects that everyone is probably going to have one or maybe multiple of these. Arm soreness is the most common. Second to that, you probably have some fatigue, and then maybe a little bit of headache. Some people get some chills, and some people actually get a little bit of fever. The good part of this that I'd like to say, even though there's not a whole lot good about what I just said, the good part is that these symptoms last for about 24, maybe 48 hours at the most. So if you can kind of deal with a little bit of discomfort for 24, 48 hours, you're going to be much better off by getting the shot in rather than trying to deal with actually having COVID, which lasts much longer and the effects could be much worse.
Dr. Schaffner, people are always concerned about long-term effects as well. Are there any predictions in terms of what we could be looking at a year, 2 years, 5 years from now?
Well, the new viruses on the block, if you will, are of course the variants. These are changes due to mutations in the parent strain of the COVID virus. And these variants are somewhat different than the parent strain. And the question will be, are they so different that we have to, down the road, create a different vaccine to give ourselves boosters over time, the way we do with influenza vaccine? That's also a virus that changes very quickly, and so we have to reformulate that vaccine on an annual basis. Will we have to do that with COVID? We're not quite there yet. However, the scientists, both in the companies and in the National Institutes of Health, are already foreseeing that possibility, and so they're already working on, shall we say, second generation COVID vaccines that may be necessary in the future.
1 year ago, no matter where you were in the world, you were facing this new virus. You were facing a lot of uncertainty, where a year later, the vaccines are around the world. Is there an alternative? Could we be doing anything else to get past this pandemic? Is this really the only way out for us?
Dr. McKee?
Yeah, I wish I could say there was an easier answer. And but it really comes down to a couple things. Get the vaccine, wear your mask, stay physically distanced, don't involve yourself in high risk activities that could actually transmit the virus, and disinfect your hands. If we can just do those couple things, we will be well on our way to kind of controlling this pandemic.
Dr. Schaffner, I know that you have been speaking to this time and time again. People see the vaccine, and there's still some resistance to it. What do you say to those folks who said, I'm just not interested in taking a vaccine, or I'm not comfortable with this?
Well, the first thing is we have to acknowledge the validity of their concern and say, we understand that you have the concern. That's entirely normal. And then ask them what their specific concern is, and then respond to that. We can respond to all of the safety issues, that's clear. And then we can remind them that people of any age can be afflicted by the COVID virus and be put into the hospital very quickly. Many of the patients we have in my medical center at the present time are young adults. So young adults can be affected by this virus just as older adults can. And so we would try to make people feel comfortable and reassured that it is a good thing to do, both for them, their families, and their entire community, that they come forward and be vaccinated. The vaccines are safe, and they are very effective in preventing your having to go into the hospital, wear a ventilator, and preventing your dying from this very, very bad virus. And we can do this if we all do this together.
Hey, Dr. Schaffner, I want to add to that, because I think the other important part for folks that are a little hesitant is, even if you don't want to do it for yourself, you don't think you're going to get the virus, you don't think you need this shot, do it for everyone else, because we're not going to get through this. The world is not going to get through this pandemic unless we all work on this together. And so if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your grandmother, do it for your neighbor, do it for all the folks in the world that would like to get back to some type of normalcy in the world. That's another good reason.
Dr. Majette, that's a beautiful thought. I agree with it completely.
I want to throw at you all, or I want you to give us, if you can, an analysis of the different, or how the different vaccines have performed. Have any of them outperformed? Are there any major differences? We're talking about the Oxford AstraZeneca, the Novavax, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. Have any of them outperformed? Are there any major differences that you all have noticed at this point?
Dr. Majette?
Yeah, I'll start that. So no, there's no major differences in the safety profile or the efficacy profile of the vaccines. Probably the better message is, if you have a chance to get a vaccine, is get the vaccine. You're going to be, whatever vaccine you have available is going to be your chances better of taking the vaccine and potential consequences of the vaccine than dealing with the consequences or potential consequences of having COVID. And not only to yourself, but then spreading that to the rest of your family and your community.
The way I like to say it, the best vaccine is the one that's available for you today. Take that vaccine.
And I guess you connect that by saying, doesn't matter which one it is, whatever is available to you, you should take.
I like that philosophy. And my colleagues in public health that I know about and my clinical colleagues all agree. Take the vaccine that's available to you today. Don't be so picky. Just roll up your sleeve and get the vaccine, not only for yourself, but also for your entire community, your family, and your friends.
Do you think a lot of the fears and concerns that people have are rooted? Well, let me go back a bit. There's so many conspiracy theories out there as to where this virus came from. Was it created to stem the growth of the population? There's so many things that I hear almost daily. And there's just so much information out there. How do people decipher what's real, what they should pay attention to? Because some days you're hearing this is working, and then 10 minutes later you get some story from somewhere saying, these are the side effects, or you shouldn't be doing this. There's just so much information. And, I always said, God bless the internet, because it's made us, it's put information at our fingertips, but it's also caused something else. So what do you say to folks who just don't know where to turn, don't know what to believe?
Dr. Majette, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say make sure that if you're looking for information, and most folks nowadays are on the internet looking for information, Facebook is probably not the best. Any of the social media sites are probably not the best place to look for good, valid information. Go to a reputable website. Most of the hospitals or hospital systems are putting out information locally about the vaccine, about the virus and the vaccines. That's going to be good information. In the United States, if you want to go to the CDC, or actually anywhere, I mean, it's there. They're going to put out only good information. Another good website that I just recommend to my patients, just because it's here in the United States, and I know it's a very good website that gives very good information that's been vetted, is Mayo Clinic. I just love their website for patients. It's just very good information, and it's at a level where people can understand.
Gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break in the show. We've got a couple more questions to throw at you, so stay with us. We're going to invite our viewers to stay with us as well. Stay on the record is going to be back right after this. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back to On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer, and tonight our hot topic is to vaccinate or not. Let's hope you are vaccinated. I'm joined tonight by two experts, Dr. William Schaffner. He's a professor of Preventative Medicine within the Department of Health Policy in the U.S., and Dr. Majette. He's the clinical instructor of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Gentlemen, the CDC, I think it was last week, set out a set of guidelines for those who had been vaccinated, particularly if you had received your second shot. I want to talk about that in particular and really what happens next. Once you've been vaccinated, and I'm talking about those who are taking the 2 shots as a part of the vaccination. Once you've been vaccinated, what kinds of activities can you now begin to engage in again?
Well, let me just start, and Dr. Majette can follow up. I think the CDC has told us, Jerome, that people who are vaccinated can gather together in small groups to have a dinner party, to have a game of cards, and begin to re-socialize again. And also that people who've been vaccinated, such as grandparents, can now welcome into their home a family that has not yet been vaccinated, but who has been careful. We're not talking about getting together in large groups. And still, when vaccinated people go out in public, they should still continue to wear their masks and observe social distancing. We must still be careful. Remember, the vaccines are 95% effective, not 100%. Dr. Majette?
Yeah, I don't think I'd add anything more to that. I think that was just very well said. Maybe just one piece. It's technically it's 2 weeks after you receive your second vaccine. If it's a 2 vaccine dose like Pfizer or Moderna, it's 2 weeks after the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, since that's just a single vaccine. That's when you actually have your maximum kind of antibodies to protect you from transmission.
This week there was also a report about the transmission from mother to fetus. I think there was an instance where a mother had been vaccinated and then shortly after the birth of the child, There was a study done. I want to talk about what this could mean for pregnant mothers.
Well, Jerome, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists convened a very large group. They were experts in pregnancy, maternal, and fetal medicine. And they reaffirmed the notion that young women who are thinking about becoming pregnant or wish to become pregnant, pregnant women themselves, and women who are breastfeeding can receive the vaccine. We're particularly concerned about pregnant women because, if they acquire COVID infection, they're more likely to get a severe disease. And it's also important to understand that they may be passing some of their protection on to their newborn baby.
And are there any risks, though, for mothers taking this vaccine? Whenever a woman is with child, there are some inherent risks. But women who are pregnant, should they have any concerns?
Dr. Majette?
Yeah, I would say concern is always healthy, but we haven't seen any evidence that there's any adverse effects to women that are either pregnant or breastfeeding from the vaccine. There's just been no evidence. Now, we are doing some studies. They're still gathering evidence, and the vaccine's only been around for about 3 months now. So, but all the early kind of indications show that it's been very safe in both of those categories.
What we're seeing as well in the United States, a lot of states are opening up early. People are resuming activities, sometimes against the advice of health experts. Is there a risk then, once people start to receive this vaccine even more, that they may prematurely start some activities that they had halted or involve themselves in some risky behavior?
Well, Jerome, that's a difficult question. It is clearly the case that in some states, the governors have discontinued the mask mandates, and there are people out there, clearly some vaccinated, many unvaccinated, who are going back and going into group activities, going to restaurants, to bars. And of course, here in the United States, we have spring break. A lot of college students are going south to the beaches where they will get together. The beaches, well, they can be separate there, and it's out of doors, so the risk is lower, not zero, but lower. But then they will go indoors to the bars, to the restaurants, and they will have romantic relationships. These are environments where the virus can spread, and we need to remember that individuals can be infected with the virus but have no symptoms, but they can still spread it to others. And so I am concerned that as these students come back across the United States, some of them will take the virus with them and set up little mini outbreaks across the country. So I am concerned that we are in a delicate position now. Yes, we're vaccinating more, but we still need people to be careful because we could have a surge of infections as people open up, if you will, more carelessly rather than carefully. Dr. Majette?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said. My personal opinion is I think it's just a little too early. I do understand the sentiment, and I would love to get back together with my family and do some things that we used to do, but it's just too early. We only have about 12% or so fully vaccinated people here in the United States, and we probably are one of the countries that's further ahead than most. That's just not going to do it. That's not enough. We really need to be 75, 80% vaccinated before we really get any type of kind of protection from herd immunity, which is the other term that people have kind of probably heard about.
When we're a small country that's very dependent upon tourism and people traveling. Once people start to get, I think the CDC has not really spoken or has not approved travel for people who are vaccinated. But again, I'm going to throw it out there on the table. If people have received a full vaccination, do you advise that they travel? Is it okay to travel? Is it less risky for them to travel?
Well, I think, Jerome, the CDC will provide some more recommendations fairly shortly, and I think travel will probably be addressed. My continuing recommendation is for people who are vaccinated, if they wish to travel, to do so very carefully, to try to avoid large groups, maintain social distancing, and of course, continue to wear their masks. Dr. Majette, would you agree, or are you a little freer in recommending travel?
No, I'm right in line with exactly what you said. I think you can travel safely. I think there are some forms of travel and some destinations and activities that are just too risky right now. And if you want to travel, let's give an example of the kind of low risk. If you were going with your family, your immediate family going camping, you guys are driving there, and you're basically by yourselves with your family members there or your pod, that's a very low risk activity. On the other hand, if you're doing something that requires commercial travel, your destination has another 10,000 people that are there, and everyone is, doing kind of back to business as usual. That's just way too much. I think you have to find that those low risk activities until we kind of get this pandemic under better control.
People have told me, the medical community, the global medical community, has said it was just a matter of time before we had a global pandemic like this. And in many quarters, there was almost they were almost preparing for it. This is unprecedented in all of our lifetimes. But from where you all sit, are there things that we have learned, do you think, that will fend off something like this in the future? Or should we have something like this again, do you think the response will be different?
I'll let Dr. Majette start.
I would hope the response would be different. I think it's the sort of thing where prevention, and when you're kind of preparing for something, back up for a second. It's kind of like having insurance. No one wants to pay for insurance, but everyone loves insurance when something actually happens, whether it's car insurance or health insurance or life insurance. We have to invest in the things that we know are going to help people in our communities, not just individuals, but our communities in the long run. And that has to be an investment. And we have to remember that we need to invest in that. And as time goes and our memories wane 20, 30 years from now, we have to remind ourselves of this time and this message that we need to invest in that prevention so that we are ready when something happens.
Perfect.
So you're just going to rely on that answer. All right. No,
perfect.
Good stuff. I do, though, want to talk about sort of the response of the United States. There was a lot of criticism prior to this new administration on what was happening and whether the response could have been better. Do you think if the United States had gone down a different road, globally things would have been different? Or, sort of, can you give us your take on how do you think things might have turned out differently had the U.S. gone a slightly different course?
Well, as Dr. Majette said just previously, it would have been good if we had been better prepared and had continued to invest in our public health infrastructure. And then when the pandemic became evident, I think one of the great lessons is that we should put our public health authorities out in front and let them lead. And our political leaders should support the public health authorities, that policies should be based on solid, good science, and then they should be communicated very clearly in a sustained fashion, and let people know that because it is a pandemic and new, we will have to change our policies gradually over time. And if the public health authorities can lead in that very clear science-based messaging, I think there's a greater confidence that the public has. It's not so good to lead with the politics. I would pull that back and let public health be in the front.
Dr. Majette, do you think do you feel that the medical community, even the scientific community, their credibility has been challenged in many ways? I see people outright challenging information that's coming from bodies like the CDC, the WHO. They challenge things that Dr. Schaffner says on other networks. They challenge a Dr. Fauci. They're challenging individuals like yourself. I'm sure even as this show is airing, people are challenging what you're saying. And I don't ever remember a time in my short existence when we have had the competency, the work, all of these things challenged by so many people. It just seems that, you guys are really under duress.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think it's part of a sign of the times of this time of social media. Everyone can be an expert.
Everyone is an expert.
All you need is a microphone, and in some ways that's good. I mean, transparency is really good, and that's one of the things that I think the medical community has been pretty good with in the past couple of years. But I think we kind of got a little bit of a black eye with our kind of initial response, or I'd say our administration's initial response. I think we can do better, and I think if we continue working to do better, we can kind of improve patients and people's confidence in the medical community, which is one of the reasons we're really trying to have talks like these, because these talks hopefully will allow people to understand that there's a lot more than just opinion. My opinion and our opinion is not just based upon what I think as a physician. It's based upon a lot of research, a lot of consensus among large groups of doctors getting together. And that is obviously different from my neighbor's opinion about what's going on and what should be done.
And I think that probably is where a lot of the confusion comes in. People say to me, oh, I've heard or I've seen, and I challenge, I say, well, where did you hear it? Where did you see this kind of stuff? Once that happens, how do you guys regain now the public trust and confidence?
Well, Jerome, I think we're doing, as Dr. Majette just said, what we're doing right now. We're trying to speak through you with your assistance directly to the people, trying to provide good information that's science-based and to develop their confidence and their reassurance that what's happening is in their own particular best interest. And that has to do with their very specific community, their circle of friends, their families. And if we can reach them in providing that reassurance, then they can have confidence in the national policies.
I want you all to help me now look into the crystal ball of the future. What do you predict the next 6 to 8 months will look like globally? We're talking to you, you're in the United States, you all are moving ahead, but the rest of the world is also trying to move ahead. But where do you see all of this in the next 6 to 8 months?
Dr. Majette's crystal ball is much clearer than mine. So we'll let him go first.
Yeah, I really wish I had a better crystal ball. My opinion is I think this is going to be a slow climb. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And I think if everyone sets their expectations accordingly, we're going to start to get people vaccinated. But those rates it's going to take just 6 to 8 months. I mean, that's really a drop in the bucket. To get the world immunized, 7-point-whatever billion people we have, that's probably a year or two. If we do everything correctly and we are able to really mobilize our efforts. I'll stop there and let
Dr. Schaffner, it's time for you to polish your crystal ball now and tell us where do you think we're going to be? Let's even take it a little further in your case. Let's say a year and a half from now.
Well, I think, first of all, we have to let people know that this virus is not going to just disappear. That's been said before, but that's incorrect. We, the human condition, all of us around the world will be coping with this virus and its variants going forward, just as we cope with influenza on an annual basis. And so I think the combination of progressive vaccination of more and more of the world's population, I'm cautiously optimistic, will suppress this virus. But there will be variants. And I would not be surprised, I'm not predicting this, but I'm not surprised if we will be getting booster vaccines on down the road as we attempt constantly to respond to what this virus is doing. We're doing that, of course, with influenza also. So this is, as Dr. Majette said, a marathon. It's not a sprint. We can try to end the pandemic, that is, reduce the impact of this virus around the world, but it won't be completely gone, and we'll be continuing to cope with it.
I think, and that's the takeaway, gentlemen, that this is, this vaccine is not the panacea to end all things COVID, but that we are going to be living with this probably for the rest of our natural lives. And very quickly to address that, I mean, going forward, this could be just as the common cold is, right? Or the flu.
Well, it's a worse virus certainly than the common cold and even worse than the flu. So we need to continue to take it seriously. There are still people in the United States who are in COVID denial. That's very, very
We have some here as
unfortunate.
well, Dr. Schaffner. You're not alone in that, but go ahead.
Well, that's very unfortunate because we would like them to join the rest of us in getting vaccinated. We would not like them to suffer the impact of COVID themselves and in their families and their communities.
Dr. Majette, we're going to give you some closing comments. People are looking at this and they're eagerly, and in some instances eagerly anticipating the vaccine as the way out, and thinking, oh, well, once I get this, we can breathe that collective sigh of relief and we'll be okay.
Yeah, I would hope people would think about it this way. The vaccine is one tool that we have to protect you from getting COVID or transmitting COVID. But we layer these tools. Vaccine's important. Wearing your mask is important. Still distancing is important. Washing your hands and disinfecting surfaces are all important. If you do the combination of all 3, 4, 5 of these things, that's your best strategy to keep yourself and your families safe and to allow our world to get back to some form of normalcy.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking time to speak with us and to share your great knowledge and insight with our viewers. We really appreciate it. Dr. Schaffner, you're becoming a regular on the record. I keep promising you that when you come to Bahamas, we'll bring you into the studio. So that offer still stands. Dr. Majette, we'll be happy to have you come visit us as well. We're a tourist destination, and as soon as you can, get a break, come enjoy some of the great weather and great beaches we have in the Bahamas.
Good to be with you both.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Stay with us. We'll continue with more on the record right after this. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory, take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV, cable channel 212, and streaming live on Facebook. Welcome back to On the Record. Thank you so much for watching. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer, and tonight we are taking a deeper dive into this whole vaccine process. To vaccinate or not, my guest for this segment is the Deputy Chair of the COVID Consultation Committee, Mr. Ed Fields. Ed, thank you so much for joining us. I know this is a busy time for you in Loyola Hall, but let's talk about, first of all, how the vaccines are being administered. What's the process in getting the vaccines to the public?
Well, Jerome, as you know, we are opening the vaccination step. We're opening the vaccination centers. We see there's a lot of buzz around me. I'm actually at Loyola Hall. We're opening up the vaccine centers in a staggered manner so that we can do it properly and make sure that all of the technical aspects of this thing roll out smoothly. We want to make sure that this is looked at from a customer service perspective so that people who are coming will wait the shortest amount of time as possible. And so while this morning the uptake is actually pretty positive, the vaccination stations are full. We want to make sure that there's a gradual, involvement, participation, so that we can make sure that we work out every bit of the little bugs that would cause people to wait an unreasonable period of time.
So what do I need if I'm a healthcare worker, because you're dealing with the healthcare workers at this point, I take it. What do they need when they come to the hall? I mean, what do you need a work ID? How does it work?
I'm glad you brought that up, Jerome, because I want to say something and I want to make sure that the air is clear on this. Because of the supply issue, we have a limited amount of vaccine and we want to roll it out that is equitable and fair to everyone. And that means that we need to be very, very cautious about exceptions. I know a lot of people are very, very concerned about their parents and their grandparents, but the reality is we can't have, for instance, scenarios where people are wanting to have their parents, because they're a doctor or a nurse, to have their parents come and get vaccinated and to say, for instance, they work in their office. We really need to focus on being fair and equitable. You know, we have a little issue with that in this country and other countries. There are people dressing up as old elderly people in order to get the vaccine. I've had to turn away some people. It's not a pleasant thing, but we want to make sure that you know that in this first tranche, what we're trying to do is to get people who are on the front line, people who are seeing patients and
So,
customers, people
wait,
who have for the last year been exposed to people who have COVID. We want to make sure that those people are taken care of
so
first.
people are literally dressing up as elderly people coming for vaccines?
Not in the Bahamas,
Okay. Just
because in the
making
Bahamas we
sure.
don't have
Okay.
65. Yeah, we don't have the 65-year and older
Okay.
grouping in. But in the
Okay.
U.S., where people 65 years and older are getting vaccines, people are literally dressing up as elderly people and
Well,
showing up to get
let's hope we
vaccinated.
don't have that when we get to that point. So I know we're dealing right now with a lot of the public healthcare workers. What about those who are in private healthcare, who in some instances are just as much at risk?
Yeah, so again, they are also entitled to sign up and to get vaccinations. You have to keep in mind that many of the healthcare workers are also, especially physicians and nurses, are also associated with the public facilities as well. So they certainly are able to sign up to those facilities. You know, we're not going to turn down healthcare workers who are bona fide healthcare workers and frontline healthcare workers. But we just want to make sure that people know, and we're not trying to be inconsiderate. We want to make sure that people realize that once you start going down the road of exceptions, then it becomes problematic. And so, I know that you are concerned about your 75-year-old and your 80-year-old mothers and grandmothers, but we have to do this right. Those people's turn will come, and hopefully they will come very shortly. And we will have centers, various centers around the island to be able to facilitate them in a very efficient manner as well.
Now, I know that we are expecting some more vaccines at the end of the month. Are you able to say when and where they may arrive? And I guess further to that is, where do the family islands factor into this process?
Right. So again, as I said to the media earlier this morning, Jerome, the supply is our issue. It is the only issue that we are facing. Well, we have some other little issues, but that is the problem. Um, as you know, initially our intent from our initial press conference was to be able to roll out to, when we thought we would get 100,000 doses by the end of February. Our intent was to roll out to the priority groups, that is healthcare workers, uniformed services, people over 65. And when we went to the Family Islands to do those, we would have given vaccines to all the people in the Family Islands, especially the smaller ones. That obviously has changed for 20,000. So we're now looking at how we adjust those priority groups and actually have to put tiers within each priority group. So, for instance, those in the southern Bahamas where there's not been um, cases of COVID for over 160 days. Those will not be in this first rollout. Grand Bahama will be rolled out on Monday for the healthcare workers. We are then now going to look at things like Abaco, where we see some action happening there. And of course, we're going to monitor what the uptake is here. Based on that uptake, by next week, hopefully we can say, okay, how do we re-strategize to make use of more vaccine in a wider range?
I know 20,000, depending on how you look at it, may not seem like a lot. But, you mentioned that our issue continues to be the supply. Are you looking at how we're going to stretch that supply out as we wait for the other, for the rest to arrive? Or is there a strategy in place, and how we're going to use those 20,000?
Right. So last week or a week and a half ago, we would have said to you, Jerome, based on the what we were getting, that we were going to take that 20,000, okay, and we were going to give out all 20,000 because we felt that the supply would be coming in at such a pace that we would be able to not worry about the second dose. Now there's some degree of uncertainty because, as you know, the world is experiencing a supply shortage. Okay, and it is a big deal. Countries all over the world are having to postpone certain priority groups, et cetera, and we're no different. So the reality is that we're now going to have to see what the uptake is and literally strategize when we release the additional 10,000. We may only be able to do 10,000 in this first go, depending on the uptake. And then we'll see what happens based on supply, see when we can release those supplies, the other 10,000. So unfortunately, Jerome, we are put in a position, unlike the United States and other countries where they have stocks of supply, we have to see how we are going to get supply in. And that is why I call on the general public not to be selfish. This is a collective thing. If you are a healthcare worker, we want to get you in and we want to give you a supply, a vaccine. If you are a parent of a healthcare worker, a cousin of a healthcare worker, that does not count. You are not on the front line and you are not as exposed to those. So we are asking people to please, it is not a pleasant thing to have to turn away a senior citizen. It is just not pleasant. But if you're not a healthcare worker, we really would like you to say, look, just wait for us, be patient, and we will try to get you.
Understandably. Now, I do know, just talking to some healthcare workers, a lot of this is being done online. You sign up, you get notification, etc. Is that going to be the norm going forward? And what about those who don't have access to email or don't have online access? I mean, how are they going to sign up? How are they going to be notified? And what are you going to get to say, hey, I've been vaccinated?
So what we're doing, and we haven't done it yet, but we should do it in the next couple of days or so, is we will have, certainly by the time we do the general public, we will have registration centers around the country where people who don't have devices can go in and register and get an appointment. And we will give them a confirmation number. So when they turn up to get vaccinated, they will actually have a confirmation note number that they can give to the vaccinator. If you are not able to make it to a confirmation registration site or an appointment site, we are now working on putting in the 511 calling system, so you can call and be assisted through 511 to get an appointment. But they will keep a log of your appointment so that if for some reason you forget it, they can call back and say, my name is so-and-so, my birthday is so-and-so. Can you please remind me of my confirmation number?
Are you getting something that's going to confirm your vaccination? To say, hey,
So,
I've been vaccinated?
Right. So at the end of the first dose, you'll get a note and it'll say, listen, we confirm that you've gotten your first dose. Okay. When you get your second, and we are not able to give you, we wanted to be able to allow you to make an appointment for your second dose on the spot. Because we aren't sure of those dates, we are now going to have to put into the system that you will be reminded to make a second appointment closer to the date that you're coming due. And hopefully by then we would have populated the appointment system with those dates. After the second appointment, you will get an electronic certificate that basically verifies that you have received your full dose. It will have a QR code, your name, dose batch, et cetera, et cetera.
That code, I'm sure, will eliminate any kind of duplication or falsification of that. Final question, I know you've got to go. One of the issues I continue to see, and I know that we're facing, is this whole vaccine hesitation within the community. What are you doing to address that? Because there are still, let's be honest, there's still people out there who have said they are not going to be vaccinated, or there is some hesitation or even fear of being vaccinated.
Jerome, you know, I work in an office where there were about 20 managers, okay? And each of those managers said, except for one, that they were going to get the vaccination. The only basis for them not getting the vaccination was the fact that they have never taken a vaccination. That's just their thing. They weren't necessarily going to take one. They had a choice on which one they would take. I think that the hesitancy will slow as more and more people take vaccines. There's obviously a lot of misinformation out there, but like misinformation is, it will gradually go away as people realize that those things that they said were going to happen are not happening, okay? You know, there's some people who just need the proof in the pudding. And so, you know, our job is to certainly give information. You know, as you know, the AstraZeneca buzz has kind of died down because of, you know, all of the politics, and some countries have already resumed using AstraZeneca again. And so, you know, we just have to continue to educate, to give information, and to allow people to make those decisions on their own.
Thanks a lot, Ed. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of On the Record, to Vaccinate or Not. Very special thank you to all of my guests. We appreciate the time you took to be with us. On behalf of my technical and production staff here at On the Record, we thank you, our guests, for staying tuned each week, and we look forward to seeing you next week, same place, same time, right here on The Record. Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits, venture into unknown territory. We take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV Cable Channel 212 and streaming live on Facebook on the R News Bahamas page.